If God exists, why doesn't he get rid of all pain and suffering and evil in this world? After all, if he's a powerful, loving God, wouldn't he want to do that? Now, maybe if he's not all powerful or all loving, well, then you can have good reason to understand why there's pain, suffering, and evil in this world. For if God is not all loving, then maybe sometimes he doesn't want to do what's best for people. If he's not all powerful but all loving, he might want to do what's best, but maybe is powerless sometimes to do it. But if you believe that God is all loving, all good, and also all powerful, then you got a problem with pain, suffering, and evil. The psalmist expressed that in Psalm 44, verse 24. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and oppression? The psalmist wonders. Yes, for the person of faith, there is a problem with pain, suffering, and evil. Now, sometimes people believe that pain and suffering is punishment for not being a good person. But the reality is that the Bible makes it clear that, and our current experience in the world makes it clear, that people, whether they're good or bad, whether they seek God or ignore God, they suffer. That suffering and pain is no respecter of persons. In fact, Jesus said in John chapter 16, verse 33, "In this world you will have troubles." And he was saying that to his disciples, men who chose to follow him, to do the right thing. And he promised them they would have troubles in this world. You look at all of the biblical characters that sought to please God and serve God and love God, almost all of them had tremendous troubles and difficulties, many times the direct result of seeking to be obedient to God. Jesus himself was one who struggled and faced many troubles. The great prophet Isaiah said and prophesied of the coming of Jesus and of Jesus these words: "He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain." Yes, Christ himself suffered and was very familiar with pain. He ended up dying on a cross, being crucified, innocent as he was. And in fact, the cross is the ultimate symbol of suffering and pain, and it was Christ who died on that cross. Best-selling author and pastor Tim Keller stated on a Fox TV network interview program, suffering is actually at the heart of the Christian story. Well, as we think about pain and suffering, it does fall into some different categories, and perhaps that'll help us analyze it and figure some things out. People have estimated that upwards of 90% of our pain and suffering in this world is caused by people hurting people. Think of wars and the tragedy of so many deaths and injuries, and then the tens of thousands of people many times that flee war-torn areas and end up living in refugee camps where there's a lack of food and medicine, and where disease runs rampant. All of that is the result of people hurting people. Then just in our everyday society, we keep hearing reports of murders and rapes and thefts and of abuse of all kinds, of people treating others financially in horrible ways. And even in our close, loving relationships with each other, within families and marriages, we hurt each other. So much of the pain and suffering in this world is people pain, one person causing pain in the life of another person. But there are those areas in which people can't be blamed for it. Natural disasters, for instance, often called acts of God, by the way. And yet, even many of these, God really can't be blamed for what results from them. I mean, we people insist on building our houses and cities next to rivers that frequently flood, and along ocean shores that frequently are hit with hurricanes, and build houses and cities, continue to build them on fault lines where we know eventually there will be a catastrophic earthquake. So God really can't be blamed for all of that. However, there are a number of natural disasters, and then all of the illnesses and disease in this world that still calls into question why it exists. And the Bible makes clear that we do live in a fallen, broken world, the result and the ramifications of people disobeying God and choosing, using their free choice to turn away from God, to sin, and that this has impacted the physical world as well. The Apostle Paul makes that clear in a statement that he makes in Romans chapter 8, verse 22. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pain of childbirth right up to the present time. So it's because of people's free moral choice when they chose to sin that it had ramifications in this whole world and universe of ours, and it's a broken world and universe. But couldn't God have kept us from making bad choices? Well, then we wouldn't have the freedom of choice. And so the fact is that the same freedom that allows one person to pat another person on the back to encourage them is the same freedom that allows a person to stab another person in the back. The fact is that good only has meaning if you can do bad, that love only has meaning if you can hate or show a lack of love. And so to have freedom, to have love and goodness, you have to have freedom. It's the price you pay for that. And the good news is, however, is that God does want to come to us and help us in this broken, fallen, sinful, painful, hurting world. He wants to be there for us in the midst of it. Psalm 34, verse 18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." So yes, this is a fallen, broken world, but God promises us and has set it up in such a way that He's willing to come alongside us and be with us and help us through it all. Let me repeat the quote of Jesus that I used earlier, but let me finish the quote. Jesus said, "In this world you will have troubles, but take heart, I have overcome the world." And God does not always promise to take us out of pain and suffering, but He does promise to be with us in the midst of it. Again, quoting Tim Keller, he writes, "Suffering is unbearable if you aren't certain that God is for you and with you." The good news is that God can use pain and suffering, that it's all part of His ultimate infinite plan, that there is a purpose in it, and that He can use it for some good, that He is capable of doing this. He's that kind of a great God. And so the pain and suffering that is a part of our lives, God has a plan for using it in His good way. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purposes." Yes, He does use pain and suffering. It's interesting that in my 39 plus years of ministry at this church, that I've never seen a person turn to God or start attending church because some good thing happened to them, that they came into a big inheritance or won the lottery or had a year of good health without any serious medical issues. I've never seen a person get serious about the Lord or turn to God or start attending church because good things happen in their life. But I've seen countless situations in which someone going through a tragedy or a difficulty turned to God and started attending church. God often uses pain and suffering in good and positive ways. And the fact is that when you talk about being heroic, being sacrificial, and showing love, you're never talking about a situation that's perfect and ideal, but always those kinds of qualities of sacrifice and of love expressed in infinite ways show up where situations are difficult or there's tragedy or pain and suffering of some kind. So yes, God uses all kinds of pain and suffering. It was C.S. Lewis who said that God whispers to us through our pleasures, but shouts to us through our pain. John Ortberg wrote, "If you ask people who don't believe in God why they don't, the number one reason will be suffering. If you ask people who believe in God when they grew most spiritually, the number one answer will be suffering. And so pain and suffering is just a part of the human experience that God in his infinite wisdom and love has allowed to be a part of our lives. And so we can respond to all of that by being bitter or better. We can respond to the struggles of life, the difficulties of life, the pain and suffering and evil in life by turning away from God or turning to God. He's given us that freedom. Let's make a wise choice with that freedom he's given us.